What's up, wrestling fans? It is time for another edition of The Voice of Wrestling right here on Fight.tv. I'm your host, Chris Cash, as always joined by Nick Paglino. And did you catch it? We had a new intro. Props, by the way. We got a couple of little new video things we'll be debuting tonight, but a new intro with some B-roll video shots of myself and Nick that aren't 10 years old. And so very excited about that. Got some new WWE stars in the middle of it. Will Benson, always been our graphics guy, our video guy, our website guy, kind of our everything guy. And he's really the only reason we probably do the show anymore. It's like every couple of years we want to give up, and Will's right there to be like, no, the Voice of Wrestling is a staple in my life. I don't know. Either way, Will's always appreciated. And so, of course, Will is set it all up. I thought he did a great job. And like I said, we actually have a new one, another one that we'll debut in just a little bit. But before we get started, Nick, I think next week we're also going to try to do some new little formatting stuff. You know, as we start growing, and we're still trying to do new things here at the Voice of Wrestling. We've got some really exciting things we're going to be doing going into the new year. Some new partnerships and different things that we're trying to work out. We'll have some new segments and some, of course, returning segments, some popular segments here on the show. But we're actually going to add one called the opening thought of the week and the closing thought of the week, and we're gonna and we'll get some graphics for that probably by next week. But in the meantime, I felt like it would still be fitting for us to start because I have my opening. So I'll open the show with a thought of the week, Nick. You will close the show with a random thought of the week, and we'll add that to the Voice of Wrestling each week, just like we do with the main event and some other things that we're going to be adding. But I have to start off in kind of a bad note, a somber note, Nick, that it's been weighing on me for a really, really long time. I went and saw a therapist about it. He told me to...
What are you talking about? The Cowboys won this week.
No, completely unrelated.
Okay, it's finally not about the Cowboys.
No, it's not about the Cowboys. So look, he told me I needed to confront the issue head on. And so here I am publicly with my peers and my colleagues and everybody watching to let you know that I have been in denial. I admit it. I have been in denial. I have been thinking...
Was the water cold?
Yes. I've been thinking that until this week, it all hit me on Monday night. I'm watching Raw, and after seeing what Brock Lesnar did to Jinder Mahal, I am no longer in denial that he is now a bona fide, thoroughbred jobber in the WWE. He is probably not going to elevate back to superior status anytime soon, if ever. He still looks better than 90% of the roster. He still has a mean face that rivals only Nick's when he does the impression. And I've really, really not tried to confront this issue, Nick. It's really been eating at me though for a long time. Wow. And my therapist said I just need to confront that I've just been in denial and I need to let these feelings go.
Well, Chris, you know, the first step is acceptance and admitting that you had a problem. And it was your addiction to Jinder Mahal.
Not just addiction to Jinder Mahal.
You were a Maholic.
Yes, I was a Maholic.
You were a Maholic, and you're admitting now to all of us, and that is a great step. And I'm really glad that it took Brock Lesnar, a guy who's never on television, to prove to you, to really get you to confront this addiction that you have, and realize that Jinder Mahal is a jobber. And you want to know something? If he were sitting here with us right now, I'm sure he would tell you that he agrees. And I'm sure he would reassure you with a boom.
You know what though? I'm gonna make up shirts. I'm a Maholic, and I think that I think that we should go there and maybe get a graphic artist to do his face, and I would wear it. I would wear it proudly, because not only was I an addict to Jinder Mahal, but I wanted him at a decent level. I didn't want him as a joke, as a laughing stock.
Yeah.
And how the mighty have fallen in WWE.
Oh, how the totally mediocre have fallen.
Hey, you bite your tongue. And look, he's not the only one that, I mean, you think about where a Bobby Roode is, and there's several guys, but nevertheless, I am in my grievance mode, or whatever you want to call it, and so it'll take me a little bit to get kind of out of my shell today here on the Voice of Wrestling. But here's a really good way to do that, and we have a new intro for the main event. Again, awesome job by Will. He's working his butt off to try to get everything going in the right direction here on the Voice of Wrestling. But we have an awesome topic that I cannot wait to get into. And so let's kind of go ahead and do it right about now. This is the main event here on the Voice of Wrestling. Yeah. How sexy is that intro? Thank you, Will, for a new video intro to the main event. And breaking news, actually, as we are recording this here on Tuesday. Now, everybody and their mother is reporting something that some people probably suspected after Monday Night Raw went off the air, and that is Becky Lynch did, in fact, suffer a broken nose and, which I don't think people did suspect this part of it, a concussion, and therefore is now being taken off of Survivor Series this weekend. And so we were already planning on talking about Becky Lynch, because she's a badass and deserves to be talked about as much as we possibly can talk about her. But Nick, clearly breaking news. Some people were a little worried about that after. I mean, it looked pretty vicious on Raw. It just kind of added to the whole shebang of, just that whole allure of Becky Lynch and what makes her phenomenal. But at the end of the day, still a huge blow, and we're going to break it down here on the Voice of Wrestling. But just your immediate reaction, because literally you and I just found this out as we started taping the segment.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of fans, especially if you gauge sort of the immediate reaction after Raw last night, were just sort of, enthralled by the crimson mask that Becky Lynch was wearing there after that interaction with Ronda Rousey, and just the whole really invasion of the SmackDown women on Raw, which I think was really great. I think people really were just so wrapped up in the fact that the blood added such a gnarly, badass vibe to Becky Lynch, and she reacted to it really well. She sort of wore it really well. I think people were so wrapped up in that they kind of maybe neglected to think about a possible injury. And there actually was an immediate rumor or thought, that Becky Lynch possibly suffered a broken nose. But now it's looking like, according to reports, that in addition to a broken nose, she might have also suffered a concussion. So Becky Lynch, pretty banged up, looked great. Really added to the overall chaos of the segment on Raw last night, but unfortunately might keep her off the pay-per-view. And if it does keep her off the pay-per-view, the question becomes, where do you go from here with Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey? Obviously, after Survivor Series, they're back to being on separate brands.
Right.
And I know you and I were going to sort of get into a possible future with Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey, because we've been talking about it on the show for the past several months. But, all signs after WrestleMania 34 pointed towards Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania 35. And I'm wondering to what extent WWE might be interested or willing to change those plans given the amount of momentum that Becky Lynch really has in WWE right now. You know, with everything that we're seeing and how good this feud really is between her and Ronda Rousey, could we see plans change? Because let's remember, Charlotte Flair is also on SmackDown. So, you know, if they were going to do a Raw versus SmackDown thing at WrestleMania 35, to what extent could Becky Lynch be the girl who is facing Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 35? And I guess my question now becomes, would Becky Lynch missing Survivor Series derail those plans? I don't think it would. I think it's very easy for WWE to really get right back to that if that's what they wanted to do.
I honestly, I think, I mean, you and I had been talking about this for a while now, Nick, but I think this probably helps her chances, to be honest. I think that the chances of her facing Ronda Rousey at Survivor Series and then going on to face Ronda again at WrestleMania, which you and I were originally going to kind of talk about the possible scenarios there just because of the rise of Becky Lynch and how much steam she has going into this pay-per-view and hopefully beyond. I think now the possibilities of her facing Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 35, I guess? Is that where we're at? WrestleMania next year is absolutely gone up. And I say that because I think, you know, there aren't a lot of other opportunities right now. I mean, I guess they could, but it's really difficult to kind of get the crossover matches in there, with the exception of like Survivor Series and maybe a WrestleMania. And so to me, it's like they've got to make up their mind now about how this is going to shift their plans. And to me, there's no doubt it shifts it. It's just, here's the problem we're at right now. It would be easy if they wanted to throw Charlotte Flair into a match with Ronda Rousey, but it's not the champion versus champion thing unless they do something crazy drastic, which I can't imagine. Do you know what the recovery time would even be for a broken nose, Nick? I mean, obviously it's
I don't know. And to be honest with you, I really don't even know. It could even be, depending on the severity of the break, it could even be something she could work through. I think right now it's the concussion. I mean, that's what would be first and foremost in terms of what WWE is evaluating.
Which, of course, that's going to be, I mean, that'll be taken care of, you know, within a week or two. She'll be probably cleared to return to the ring after the concussion. But the broken nose, we'll have to kind of follow along with that to see if it's going to make her miss too much action. I can't imagine that it will. But of course, you know, I mean, if it's just a month, 6 weeks, it's still long enough where they've got to make some decisions. I don't think they take the title off of her as a result of that. And again, I mean, it really does make them. Now, as far as Survivor Series go, they could just scrap the match. But I think here's the problem. You've got Ronda Rousey advertised. You want to utilize Ronda Rousey. So to me, it won't be surprising if Charlotte Flair does step up and take the place. And then here's the problem with that, Nick. Then that appeal, that big time feel of the match going, you know, that we've had for Mania now, at least in the back of our minds, that we thought was going to happen, it kind of loses its luster, so to speak. And if they do, which that might be the reason they don't throw Charlotte Flair into the match this Sunday. But what are the opportunities of that happening in your mind, Nick? And if it does, and let's say they have to say, hey, we've got to do something with Ronda Rousey. The only one that really makes sense as far as the cross-promotional, high-profile matchup makes sense is Charlotte Flair taking her place. That almost, but to me, locks in that Becky Lynch will at the very least be a part of that match at WrestleMania. I can't imagine we get an impromptu match between Flair and Rousey and then they turn around and do it again at WrestleMania, because they've been waiting on this for so long, Nick. So what are your initial thoughts as far as do you see them going in that direction? I mean, what are the other alternatives? And then, of course, if they have to throw Charlotte in this weekend, does that effectively change everything about the Mania match even more in your mind?
Well, I don't think so, because again, I always go back to reminding myself that this is SmackDown versus Raw, and this storyline, no matter what happens on Sunday, concludes for, at least for the foreseeable future on Sunday, because Rousey goes back to Raw, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, whoever ends up in that match goes back to SmackDown. So they would have to pick this up later. And remember that Nia Jax is also in this fold. After she won the Women's Battle Royal match at Evolution, she now has a title shot coming up. So you could very easily, and this is, if you look at it from just a storytelling standpoint, this is what makes the most sense. Because I did find it the only part of the segment last night, or this week on Raw, that I didn't like, and they do this often, it's part of the whole idea of the SmackDown versus Raw thing that they do every year, and no matter what, it always feels like it comes out of left field, that it's, oh, wait a minute, it's that SmackDown versus Raw bit that they do every year at Survivor Series that fans don't really care about because they drop it for the rest of the year. So because you have this SmackDown versus Raw thing, it's almost like they forget what's going on the individual shows. And just, I don't know how it struck to you, but just seeing Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch working well together in the ring on Raw this week was ridiculous to me. I mean, these are girls that are just, absolutely hate each other. They're tearing at each other's throats week in and week out on SmackDown. Right. And all of a sudden, I'm supposed to see them in the corner on Raw working together and double teaming people. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I don't like when characters put aside the feud for the sake of some other more insignificant storyline. So, I think the thing that would make sense from a storyline standpoint is for Charlotte Flair to come out, or maybe you've got, Shane McMahon or Paige, one of the two, come out on SmackDown. They say, Becky Lynch suffered injuries on Raw, is unable to compete, and therefore that match has been canceled at Survivor Series. Charlotte Flair's music hits. She comes out and she says, no, this match is not canceled. The person that will be facing Ronda Rousey is the person that should have been facing Ronda Rousey all along, which is the best female talent, not only on SmackDown, but in WWE. And it's Charlotte Flair. I'm the one, So you book this sort of impromptu match on Sunday, and really the match can just go for, it doesn't even need to really go more than 2 minutes before then Nia hits the ring and she attacks all of them. She lays out Charlotte. She lays out Ronda. The match gets thrown out. She cuts a promo saying, Becky thinks she's the man. Charlotte thinks she's the man. Ronda Rousey, the man is right here on Raw, and I'm coming after Ronda Rousey's title. I think that's a way that you can book yourself around this injury that Becky Lynch has sustained, and then you can always pick this up then. Remember, WrestleMania is not right around the corner. We've got plenty of time until WrestleMania, and we have plenty of ways for someone like a Charlotte Flair or a Becky Lynch to get to Ronda Rousey. One of them could be winning the Women's Royal Rumble match and then going on to challenge Ronda Rousey, because whoever wins that match can challenge for either of the women's titles. So I think that's a way that they could get themselves out of this Sunday relatively unscathed. It keeps the storyline between Charlotte and Becky going, because then Becky can come back and be even more pissed off that Charlotte took her place in the match against Ronda Rousey. So I think, in a way, the timing of this injury, while horrible, can be somewhat lucky for WWE, in the sense that this is a SmackDown versus Raw pay-per-view, so they can get away from this quite quickly after the pay-per-view.
Well, and again, I think it's an opportunity for a number of things. One, you protect Becky completely, although I think your scenario of Nia, or obviously some form of interference taking place at Survivor Series, was almost inevitable. I think that WWE understands the importance of protecting Becky and Ronda.
At this point, right. It's the interference at this point now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think it's an opportunity for that, obviously, keeping Becky out of that match completely, because now Becky and Ronda is going to mean that much more the next time around when they get the opportunity to follow through with it. But also, I think it's a good thing for Charlotte, even though I think in your scenario of her coming out and kind of putting down Becky on the way to that match, even though it's a great promo and it makes a lot of sense, they're really careful how they're treating Charlotte, especially in her promos and all of that. It's not going over real well, but at the end of the day, they still want her as a babyface, and I don't think they want to come out too strong with Charlotte in the sense, but she's got to be confident. She's got to come out and demand that match, and I think it's a good opportunity for her to step up in some relevance when she's kind of being a little bit overshadowed, without a question, by Becky Lynch, and they desperately don't want that to happen. You can tell they really, really are high on Charlotte, and I like Charlotte, and I think she's come a long way and deserves to be in the spotlight as well. Not over Becky, though, and I think it's going to be an interesting scenario to see how they handle this pay-per-view. But I think it's got to be some form of what we've mentioned here to try and protect all those involved and save Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey for another day. Yeah, they are.
They're all, like you said, they're all protected with the interference with Nia coming out, Nia destroying everybody. It makes Nia look strong. It builds her up as someone. It builds her up as sort of that big heel character again. That's, some of that steam had been taken away from Nia when she left dealing with her injury. So it sort of restores her to that big spotlight on Raw. And reminding everyone that she has that upcoming title shot against Ronda Rousey. And it just very simply protects the baby faces in Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair. So it works. I think it would work. But I just keep going back to whether or not the match at WrestleMania 35. I mean, if you said today, what match needs to take place at WrestleMania 35? Is it Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair, or is it Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch? I say hands down, it is Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch.
Well, and before we wrap up the main event, I did kind of want to toss that back to you. And regardless of this injury, regardless of the changes that are going to take place as a result, I think she'll gain mad respect in the back for sucking it up, and she wasn't near done with that segment before, when that all happened. I mean, she was bloody for a good period of time, and obviously had suffered the concussion at the same time, and so she was in a different world out there, still competing and closing that out and making that finale, that final shot on Raw, just $1 million from Ronda's quivering face at the very end to Becky and the entire SmackDown women's roster exiting through the crowd. I mean, it looked good. Everything was great. But she gets mad respect. And Nick, I guess the overall question at this point now is just, how do you treat it? I mean, how do you treat Becky Lynch? Because if I'm WWE, I'm going all in and then some. I'm doing whatever it takes to ride this wave, because waves like this just don't happen that often, especially so organically. In fact, normally, though, I will say, when they do happen, they happen organically, and WWE finds a way to screw it up. CM Punk and a number of, even Ryback was headed toward pretty good stardom before he kind of got buried because of CM Punk, and or not necessarily because of CM Punk, but on behalf of CM Punk. And so I feel like Nick, it's a tricky situation because you want multiple people on top. I mean, you don't want Charlotte Flair to just kind of be cast aside. Strong women need strong people to work with. Strong wrestlers on the men's side need strong opponents. So you want everybody to be as strong as you can be. And there's not been a better feud in WWE than Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. So I think WWE has done a good job keeping both of them at a high level. But Becky is on a different stratosphere, Nick. I mean, she is so above and beyond anything in WWE. And when you have Ronda Rousey on your roster, and as popular as she was coming in and still is, but yet Becky is getting Becky chants in the middle of Ronda Rousey promos, you have some sort of fire, and you need to keep adding the gasoline. But the question is, Nick, will they do it?
Wait a minute. Wait. Adding gasoline or adding the water that Dean Ambrose was using on the
yes, please don't. Yeah, that would do nothing, just like it did when he was trying to burn his shield vest.
I really hope he didn't pay like $4 a gallon for that gasoline.
You know what crossed my mind when that happened?
It doesn't work. And I hope he didn't put like the rest of that container in his car afterward, because he ain't getting out of the arena if he did.
You know what crossed my mind, as we get off on a tangent here. But I mean, for me, it was funny because as I'm watching that, I'm like, oh God, Nick's gonna be talking to me about logic and all this stuff and little things like that. That it's like, I know that's not quite the issues you have with certain things they do on WWE, but to me, it's just like the little details that they don't seem to care about. But it was kind of funny as I'm watching him apparently pour gasoline next to a big burning fire, and he was literally dousing himself in whatever that liquid substance was, and he was less than a foot away from the fire. Right. And I'm thinking that fire would be jumping over at any moment. And of course it didn't, and he knew it. And then he throws the shield vest into the fire, and of course it doesn't even flare up anymore. It was comical, but I'm sure a lot of people didn't catch it. I'm sure a lot of people did though, and it was pretty crazy. But yes, fire all the way, and please use real gasoline as you throw it on this superstardom position that they're in with Becky Lynch and Nick. I mean, I guess that is where when we talk about Mania. Even if Charlotte's involved in that match alongside the two of them with Ronda and Becky there, I feel like Becky has earned that spot, and the only reason she would not be there at this point in my mind is if she's derailed or injury.
Well, no, absolutely. Well, okay. Yes, one would think, and that's kind of what I would think, but you kind of hit the nail on the head, or I think you brought up an interesting point when you said, at least it makes me question, when you're hearing the crowd chanting Becky Lynch during Ronda Rousey promos, you wonder, how does WWE react to that? Does WWE say, we have gold and we're going to keep throwing gasoline on this roaring fire that is Becky Lynch? Or do we say, but not at the expense of Ronda Rousey? Because to what extent, and we have seen WWE cool off super, super hot acts because they're trending in a direction that WWE didn't necessarily originally have planned, or because it's forsaking another superstar that they have bigger plans for. To what extent would WWE maybe think to themselves, everyone is cheering for Becky Lynch right now, and if we put her in the ring with a Charlotte Flair, okay, that's fine. If she's stealing some of that spotlight and she's stealing some of that thunder, even though we were trying to position Charlotte Flair as the baby face and we wanted her to get the big crowd pops, that might be okay because we can always get Charlotte Flair back on track, but not Ronda Rousey, because Ronda Rousey is our big baby face. We saw it on Raw this week. She came out. She had that really great aggressive edge, especially with everything in the beginning of the show with her dealings with Stephanie McMahon. She had that really great aggressive edge. But when her music hit and she comes out, she does the big smile and she holds the title and she greets the fans. She's still that big baby face on Raw. And Chris, do you think WWE might be hesitant to continue down the path of Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch if there is the fear that Becky Lynch is going to be cheered as the babyface in this matchup?
Maybe, but I think the issue is when you mention bigger plans for one or the other, it's like Charlotte was the big plans for Ronda. That was who else is it unless it's her getting out of the women's division and facing men, unless it's more stuff with Stephanie McMahon. I mean, there's very few bigger people than what Charlotte was supposed to be and what Becky could now be. I don't know really what dream matchups do you see with Ronda and with her time left in WWE that we're not aware of at this point, besides the two people we're talking about in Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. And so no, I don't see that being something that's necessarily going to stop, at least I hope not, stop WWE from putting Becky Lynch over. Yes, I think they look at that differently than you and I have spelled it out here in the, we have gold. I don't necessarily think they love it when Becky chants happen during a Ronda promo, because they expect Ronda to be over just because she's Ronda Rousey. They forget the fact that they have the power to screw that up too. And I don't feel like they have. I think Ronda has really come a long way in her presentation, in her facial expressions. I get your thing of kind of the real extreme opposites that she portrays, as far as the smiling girl all of a sudden to being a badass, but that's how she is. I mean, she really kind of is that role, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. There's 1,000 different directions you can go in with Ronda Rousey that makes her be a badass and an overall babyface. But when you have somebody rival her on that level and one gets over more than the other, you have to pat yourself on the backs by allowing that to happen. I don't see I don't see any need for them to get upset over it. And so I hope they don't. And I hope they certainly don't hold it against Becky Lynch in any way, shape, or form.
Sure. I mean, and again, I throw it out there because I wouldn't put it past WWE sometimes.
Me neither.
We have seen them do things like that in the past.
Yep.
But if the trajectory is, and if the end game is Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 35, then certainly the trajectory in terms of how you get there could see Ronda Rousey face Becky Lynch first.
Sure.
Potentially at a Royal Rumble or something along those lines. Or, hey, look, at the end of the day, if Becky is still really that hot when we get to WrestleMania 35, I could very easily see the triple threat. We've seen WWE make that change several times in the past when, someone's heating up and the plan necessarily. I mean, we saw it with Batista. When Batista was that guy that was supposed to be the guy, right. It ended up being, they still ended up involving Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, and so we could always see the triple threat with Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte versus Becky. So here's to hoping, that they really, that they get back to it. It's a shame that Becky Lynch is derailed by this injury at such a great time for her. Here is to hoping that when she comes back, we do get to see that Ronda Rousey match, because I think both of them have been doing a great job in the small amount of time they've had to build this feud to Survivor Series.
No doubt. That's been the main event this week on The Voice of Wrestling. And we're back on The Voice of Wrestling. And Nick, I wanted to kind of jump back into this before we run down Survivor Series, talk a little bit more about kind of what transitioned or what came out of Monday Night Raw this week. But, I brought up an interesting fact last week about the median age for the WWE viewer being exceptionally higher than either one of us thought that it could possibly be. When I asked you to guess, I think you were in the mid-20s, as far as what the average age for a WWE TV viewer is. It doesn't mean WWE fan, but the ones that are still watching it on TV, which is still the majority of fans, the average age was way higher than we thought. In fact, from 2000, it's jumped from 2000 to like 2016. It's gone. What were the final numbers, Nick? I know it's at 54 now, right? And it was 22.
Yeah, it was. When WWE went PG in 2008, I believe the stat was 2 years prior to that. In 2006, the median age was 24 or 25.
Wow.
And now in 2016, and then just that jump, literally about a 10-year jump. In 2016, it's 54.
So besides being just shocked and us spending the next few minutes here with our mouths open, not talking, I figured we could kind of maybe steer this conversation in a couple of ways. And primarily, why are they sticking with it this long? They have those numbers, and this is coming from reputable sources. I mean, Forbes has reported on it. There's been a number of other places that, that cover, TV and ratings and demographics. I'm sure Nielsen, I'm sure there's a ton of them out there, but Forbes obviously has put this over. So this is not us making numbers up. If you're shocked that it's 54, the average television viewer for WWE is 54, you should be, and it's true. But why, Nick, I guess, knowing those numbers like they would, have they stuck with this for so long? Is it advertisers? Is it because they think there's some other underlying advantage that's going to give them or benefit at the end? gold at the end of the rainbow. I don't really know. I'm not sure. It makes no sense. You would think with them going PG, with them turning everything around and changing their entire format overall, their entire structure, everything as far as the programming side of it, you would think that if they're supposed to be targeting kids, the average age would be considerably lower if it was working. So why are they sticking with this? I mean, we've had 8 years, nearly a decade, well, we've had technically 10 years, but I mean, obviously the last report was up in 2016, so we don't know if it's gone down any in the last 2 years. Obviously it didn't make that drastic of a jump though. So they've had 10 years to consider this data. And yet here we are, Nick, still with the same programming week in and week out. And so the question number one is why? And then, of course, question number two is, should they pivot? Should they change? Should they go in a different direction? What's the pros and cons of either scenario in your mind?
Well, the only thing I can really think of, and I think we're gonna assume that, the older fan, the 50-year-old, the 54-year-old compared to, sort of the polar opposite, the younger fan, the 8, 9, 10-year-old fan, they seek very different things in pro wrestling. And I use my own experience and my own life as, evidence of that. When I was a kid, I grew up watching Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. I was enthralled by the character. I was enthralled by the larger than life character. And I mean that in two different ways. Larger than life in the fact that, they were portraying these superheroes, these unbeatable superheroes, and larger in life physically. They were massive. They were, if I saw drawings of what Superman looked like, they were the closest to that in real life. So that was what I saw. And then as I got older and I was exposed to other kinds of wrestling and I watched older wrestling, and then I started watching companies like Ring of Honor and New Japan, and then I come back to WWE when WCW introduced us to the cruiserweights and ECW introduced us to hardcore wrestling. My tastes expanded as I got older and I was more interested in the wrestling product. And I think that's more of what the older audience enjoys, the in-ring wrestling product. Because you got to remember, I mean, let's say when I was 10 years old in 1988, I was watching the Hogans and the Ultimate Warriors. Well, the median wrestling fan nowadays, when they were 10 years old, it was in the 70s. So they were watching wrestling that was sport-based. It was technical. It was, the sort of the Ric Flairs and the Harley Races and the Nick Bockwinkel's and the wrestlers who brought in authenticity to the in-ring product. And the focus was on the in-ring product before they became, before Vince McMahon Jr. and the WWF started creating the sort of cartoon characters of the 80s. And so I think for a very certain crowd, for a very certain niche crowd, they have held on to that. And they, I know a lot of guys that are in their late 40s, early 50s. They either don't watch the WWE product right now, or they watch much less of it because they still yearn for the product they watched when they were kids, which was the more sport-oriented version of pro wrestling, and less the storylines and the over-the-top characters and the cartoon aspect of WWF in the 80s. So, to answer your question, why haven't we seen a change? Or is it worth it for WWE to go back, maybe to revert to? And what do we always say they're going to revert to if they revert from the PG era? Attitude era, right? Are they going to go back to that? I would say the answer is always going to be no, because it's still a sponsorship issue. And it's still an advertising issue. And I still think at the end of the day, advertisers and sponsors want to be connected to a more wholesome product than they do a more racy product. And I think, and the argument against that you could use is like, well, why do you have sponsors that are sponsoring American Horror Story, which is a violent horror show? I think it goes back to the stigma of pro wrestling, that even if it is the most wholesome it can be, there are always people out there that are going to thumb their nose at pro wrestling and say it's lowbrow, it's stupid, it's fake, it's oily men rolling around on each other. And so justifying pro wrestling to begin with, I think, is very difficult. So I think advertisers saying, listen, don't make this any more difficult than it already is with your big babyface character pounding beers and flicking off the crowd and having segments where someone gives birth to a hand. That's going to make it even more difficult to sponsor these shows. So for me, I would have to think advertisers and sponsors still prefer the PG product to the more racy TVMA product of the early 2000s and the late 90s.
A couple of things there. One, I agree with you, and I think WWE and them will look at it that way as far as if they're going to revert to anything, it's got to be some version of the Attitude Era. Maybe some version is a good way to represent it, but I don't even think that's true. I just think an edgier product and a cooler product is a better way to kind of position this conversation, because I don't want them to go back to the Attitude Era. I just want them to be cool again and more enjoyable than they are. So that's really kind of a one level of clarification that I at least want to put out there on the table and say that I don't look at it from that point of view. However, a couple of things in the sense of who's watching today. When you consider the fact that our kids, Nick, I know you don't have kids yet, but I do. I've got two. And of course, the people that have been around and were huge fans during the Attitude Era or during the early 90s or during the 80s, they've got kids now, obviously, and they've got young kids. A good portion of them, maybe not the ones from the 80s, but, 90s and 2000s, people my age, obviously, now are having kids that are plenty old enough to get into wrestling if they want to. But they're not getting in. They're watching American Horror Story or whatever the hell that thing is called. And I know that's what my daughter at 10 years old wants to watch. And so they're watching things that are cool. And let's just be honest about things. Right now in its current state, wrestling isn't cool. Maybe to a certain sector of fans and wholesome families that exist. But Nick, you know as much as I do, and I feel, we could go political here to kind of give some facts behind it, but there's no point in it. I think that millennials, Generation Z, whatever you want to call them at this point, they really are in some ways kind of taking over in a lot of different things. From technology, even your business owners these days, it's kind of out with the old money, in with the new. Even your big time business owners are younger, and I think advertisers are different. They want to spend their money where they're going to reach people that are going to buy their product, whichever way it goes. Besides all that, I feel like Vince McMahon has set himself up in such a way that he kind of bypasses all of that anyway. Not for Raw, maybe not for SmackDown, and understand the huge deals, and maybe there's some issues or could be issues down the road if they went back to kind of an edgier product where Fox, and obviously USA, but Fox, the cable companies would basically say, look, you can't do these types of things because we've got sponsors. But if push comes to shove, Nick, and the product is better, Vince has found a way to bypass a lot of that through the WWE network. He has the fan base now that's going to keep him in business for a long, long time. But the product being better would only help that cause. And so I don't think advertising is an issue. Maybe they view it as an issue, and maybe they view it as a reason why they can't go back to something that resembled the Attitude Era. But I feel like they could, and I feel like that's a stupid excuse or a cop-out of some kind, and it's really an ignorant one, because I can't imagine, Nick, that advertisers are going to bail on them if they increase their viewers four times what's watching now. I can't imagine that just because it gets a little racy, it's going to be a big deal when you consider, even in a PC environment that we live in so many ways, it's still really, I mean, what's on TV nowadays is still worse if you want to go down that path than it used to be. Sure. And so I don't see that being a problem. But at the end of the day, Nick, as it kind of relates to our conversation, what they're doing isn't working. If they're targeting kids and families, clearly it's not working, or the average age would be way down from where it's at. So what do they have to show for it? I mean, what other excuses besides, as you're talking about, maybe it's just as simple as advertising, but I can't imagine that's it. I mean, it just...
Well, it is if you, when you talk about making you talk about making the product cool again, how does WWE interpret making the product cool again?
Well, I think that's the problem, is the people that are making those decisions.
Man, it's getting back to fart jokes and some of the things, because remember, there was a lot of, as much as the Attitude Era might have produced great stars and great storytelling, we always have to remind ourselves and anyone listening that the Attitude Era provided a lot of over-the-top garbage too. There were a lot of ridiculous, silly, over-the-top segments that people really didn't like. And so it depends on, I think sometimes WWE feels like making the product edgier and cooler means saying the word bitch a lot on television, or calling someone a son of a bitch.
I would agree with that.
Or edgier.
I would agree with that. And that
doesn't necessarily mean that's true.
No.
Look at Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey right now. Yeah, they're hurling a couple of expletive insults toward each other, but for the most part, these are just two hard-hitting, badass athletes that are creating stories that are edgy in the fact that, and that are sort of cool because the characters that they're portraying are cool. And then that's rubbing off on the audience, right? As opposed to WWE just having them come out and cutting ridiculous promos. There was nothing about Ronda Rousey's promo to kick off Raw last night that was, racy or R-rated or X-rated, yet it felt badass. It felt like she was coming out. She was letting the action do the talking. And I think if WWE continues going down those kinds of paths and creating those kinds of stars, we saw it a little bit in Dean Ambrose on Raw this week, right? When he said, if you look at it, I've always been the same person that I always have been. I've always been Dean Ambrose, and I want to prove that now. So as long as they don't have him go down the path of the cowardly heel like they do with every one of their heels, if they avoid some of these cliches and they avoid treading down some of these trails that they've already been down before with their characters, we're seeing something new and creative and organic out of Becky Lynch right now. That's the edginess. That's what's cool about it. When they're becoming more true to themselves, and it's not so, and it's less scripted, and you don't really care who is Becky Lynch intended for. Right. Becky Lynch is intended for wrestling fans. And when I say wrestling fans, I don't mean in-ring wrestling fans. I mean people who watch WWE. And really, I think the masses out there that want to see the action and want to see the badass characters, that's who she appeals to, and what we're seeing conversely, I think, is that someone like, and I think Bayley is the best example of this. I'm a big fan of Bayley in the ring. I think she's a good, hard worker, and I liked seeing her in NXT. But this gimmick that she has, this goody two-shoes, I love giving everybody hugs gimmick, is not translating on the main roster because even kids don't want to see this. So she's not connecting with the kids. I think she's probably got her small, niche fan base, but it certainly isn't resonating. Look at Finn Balor. What a great example of that is. Look at him on Raw this week. When he came out, I was so glad when Drew McIntyre was cutting that promo, that finally Finn Balor did, the shut up, enough, I'm going to do what I always do, which is kick ass. And then they had the match instead of, this is Finn Balor's, prior to this week on Raw, Finn Balor's reaction to anything anyone ever said to him was always the smile. Because he's a babyface, and WWE is infatuated with their babyfaces constantly smiling and smiling. And you just never got – do you get the sense that in the past year WWE has established Finn Balor as a badass?
Nope.
No, he's the nice guy that does really great charity work. He supports organizations like GLAAD. He releases the T-shirt. He has the Finn Balor for everyone, and that's fantastic. It's great. I love his philanthropic work outside of WWE. But the character on television, when the cameras start rolling, does not resonate with me as a badass. And this is the guy that led the Bullet Club. That was a core nucleus of one of the coolest, baddest ass groups in all of professional wrestling, the Bullet Club. And this is the version of him that we're seeing in WWE, which is the nice guy routine, because that's what all of the baby faces do in WWE.
Yeah.
So
let's
start turning this thing on its head, and let's start. I say it again. I've said it before. Let's remember what this show is about. This is a television show about people who fight each other. So let's not see them play nice. Let's not see them hug each other. Let's see them get dirty. And last night, not only did we see them get dirty figuratively, we literally saw Becky Lynch get dirty with blood on her face, literally. We don't have to see that every week. But that's the kind of passion that I think needs to get infused in that product and those characters, right?
Yeah, and I think to kind of wrap up, I'll take it a step further, and I don't think you have to go crazy edgy. I'll add another P word. You said passion. I'll say personal. I think that's the biggest part of it, making things personal these days, and I feel like that's what's made Seth Rollins and the Dean Ambrose feud so good right now, because it feels personal. I definitely think that's what Becky Lynch and Charlotte has made their feud so good, and obviously Becky, and that's where things like the promos you're talking about, Nick, where they're saying bitch or son of a bitch or anything like that, or ass or other cuss words. It's like that's what you say sometimes when things are personal. I thought the Bellas did a phenomenal job along with Ronda in their short feud. It's like they made it personal. And when you get crowds into it, doesn't have to be shoot promos all the time. You can make fake crap up that makes it personal, but find ways to hit those buttons. And I feel like that's another thing that they could do a little better. You don't have to go crazy edgy to make the feuds feel like they're more personal. Unfortunately, 10% of the feuds have any actual personal direction in any way, shape, or form. The rest of them are things like Bobby Roode and Elias and Bobby Lashley. It's like, yeah, they're gonna fight now, and they'll threaten. Now, again, Elias did a good job. I'm not taking anything away from that feud. I think both of them are much more in their element than they had been, with Elias as a babyface, Bobby Lashley as a heel. But at the same time, add some personal effect to that feud, and you got a real winner. And so I think, again, you're going to get your jokes, and at least Elias is really good at it. But to me, let's add a little personal touch to that as well. Let Bobby do something a little bit below the belt that really pisses Elias off, and let's see his badass side, because I think that's coming too. There's a lot of natural ways you can make that stuff happen, and WWE just doesn't seem to do that as well as they used to. And I think that would definitely help kind of as far as the cool factor. But either way, guys, we want to know what you think about the age. The median age and stuff in WWE is it's astonishing to me. I would have never guessed it if I hadn't read it for myself in really multiple places. It really is. And we want to know why you think so. So wherever you're watching this, on Fight, on YouTube, etc., please let us know in the comments section below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you're going to want to here very, very soon. Before we get out of here, Nick, we got to run down Survivor Series. Obviously, it's kind of a Raw and SmackDown effect going on this Sunday. They've really put that over. Stephanie wants to win really bad. Paige and Shane really, really want to win. There's probably going to be some repercussions for the brand, as far as some of the officials, maybe a Baron Corbin, that if they don't win. Stephanie pointed out that Raw, on This Week on Raw anyway, has pointed out that Raw has won this 2 times, 2 years in a row, which kind of makes me, if I'm going to go through my picks here, probably almost guarantee that SmackDown is going to win this in some form or fashion, but we'll find out. Nick, let's where do you want to start with it? Do we want to actually run down the card, or do we want to just?
Well, let's do a little bit of rapid fire here. We can run down some of the undercard matches. We can start with the Raw Tag Team Champions, the Authors of Pain versus the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, The Bar, who of course will have Big Show in their corner. I like this match. One thing I do like about Survivor Series being the SmackDown versus Raw concept, as much as it is very difficult for fans to get into that concept because WWE ditches it for the rest of the year. And I think this year was probably even harder to get into it because this pay-per-view was surrounded by so many other bigger events like Crown Jewel and Evolution that next thing you know it,
here's Survivor
wait a minute,
Series.
In 2 weeks I got to start caring about Raw versus SmackDown again. So if for no other reason, I think Survivor Series, when they do run this concept of blue versus red, you get some fresh matchups.
Sure, you
and
do.
I do like the idea of the Authors of Pain versus the Bar because we know how physical the Bar is as a tag team, and I want to see them get in there, and I want to see them fight AOP because I think we could have a really, really great physical matchup here. To be completely honest with you, I think the Authors of Pain need to win this one. I mean, you saw what Braun Strowman did to the Raw roster, the Raw tag team roster on Raw this week, just basically decimated them, just made them feel like an absolute afterthought. I think Sheamus and Cesaro as a tag team are pretty established guys. So I'd like to see AOP sneak one out here and get a victory. Your thoughts on this one?
I'm going, the only way I'm going into this really is just going down the list of who can lose. And it makes sense and everything on the Raw side. So SmackDown wins, just so I can kind of add it up in my head. And this is one that clearly the Raw champions can and will win, in my opinion, especially with the Big Show factor. I don't think there's any chance Authors of Pain. And it's not like there's some big time baby faces. I mean, they're heels. They just beat a helpless guy in Seth Rollins for the title. And that was kind of a spur of the moment. I'm not even sure why they gave those guys the title. They could have done that turn without them winning the championships. But it was all sudden. Authors of Pain, I'm not even sure WWE's made up their mind on them. I certainly haven't made up my mind on them as champions. It just all came out of nowhere. I definitely think they take the fall at Survivor Series and give SmackDown, one of their wins.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more completely when you say AOP did not need to win those titles. And I think we can even talk about this even more in depth at a later point because, I think after next week we can sort of address, we can kind of tag in, tag out. Maybe we will bring that back next week, talk a little bit about how we feel about Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose and the Dean Ambrose heel turn as of right now, because I really think WWE left such a great storytelling possibility on the table with those guys still being Raw Tag Team Champions and at each other's throats. And Dean Ambrose not defending that title, and leaving Seth Rollins out there, I think it was a huge mistake. I would have loved to seen Dean Ambrose come out and say, damn right, I'm defending these titles. I'm part of the tag team champions as well. And then just going after Seth Rollins during or after the match. I think there's just so much potential there. But all right, I see in our prediction here, you've got the Bar winning and I have AOP winning. So I guess that gives us what? You got 1-0 SmackDown. I got 1-0 Raw at this point.
That's very, very good math. I hope it doesn't take you that long when we're 5 matches in. It took you.
You want to see if I remember our math?
Well, I'm just saying, if it took you that long to realize we were 1 and on opposite sides, you're like, all right.
Well, no, I mean, for people at home, who are trying to keep score. They've got their scorecards out right now. I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm 1-0 Raw right now. I know. You're 1-0 SmackDown.
I know, and I'm just questioning whether you're the guy to actually keep up with that or not. But go ahead, keep going.
And please, people, I encourage you to use Survivor Series cards, actual paper cards, scorecards to write these down on.
Of course,
because you never know when you're going to run out of toilet paper.
That's true.
5-on-5 tag team traditional Survivor Series elimination match. You have the Lucha House Party, Chad Gable and Bobby Roode, the Ascension, the B Team, and the Revival. These guys are all battling in a traditional Survivor Series elimination tag team match. This is, again, we saw what happened on Raw this week. Does it really even matter? I think actually this match might have been. Was this match changed? Did they add? I think they may have actually made an announcement where they added. I think it's some kind of massive. I'm going to take a look at that. While I do that, give me your thoughts real quick, because I'd be interested to hear what you think about Braun Strowman dominating the Raw tag team division last night. And I mean, to you, did it feel like just further burial of that division?
No, I think it's par for the course with the Raw tag team division. I think it was bad, but it didn't surprise me. You see Bobby Roode coming to meet Braun Strowman on the ring apron and just getting a right hand to the face, and he's dropping like the rest of the flies, and you're thinking, well, that's great. Then you see Bobby Roode and Chad Gable later on in the night, and they're having their match, and they win their match, and we're supposed to care, I guess, and forget that Braun Strowman just kicked their ass. Now, look, this isn't the first time it's happened, and gaps like this in WWE storylines has been a mainstay for a long time. I mean, you do forget about wins and losses pretty quickly, especially when they're not that high profile. But man, Bobby Roode's another one though. Really looking at how far. And I like Bobby Roode better than I like Jinder Mahal overall. But they used to make comparisons of Bobby Roode and Triple H. And even though Triple H had some bad gimmicks back in the day, and some people can say it's because, he got in bed with the McMahons that kind of elevated him to such a degree, I think talent had a lot to do. He was one of the top heels well before him and Stephanie had anything going on. But people used to actually compare Bobby Roode and Triple H. And it's, how can you do that now? I mean, to me, it's not even close.
You really can't.
Bobby has gone downhill. Now, he's probably not in jeopardy of anything anytime soon, but in the end, Bobby Roode's got a lot of work to do if he's ever going to get back to any type of relevancy.
So here we do have the match. It's actually a 20-man elimination tag team match, which is going to take place on the Survivor Series kickoff show. So essentially here, representing Team SmackDown, you're going to have the Usos and the New Day. So that's 5 guys right there. And there are going to be 3 more teams announced, and they're going to be representing the SmackDown side. So that's 5 actual teams going up against 5 teams from Raw, and that's going to be Bobby Roode and Chad Gable, as well as the Ascension, the Lucha House Party, the Revival, and the B Team. So this is just, I don't even know how all these guys are going to fit around the ring. Who goes over in this match? It seems to me like the New Day would be the guy. You're kicking off Survivor Series. You do it on a happy, fun note. The New Day goes over, or maybe the New Day is amongst the survivors of the match. Because remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be just one team. It's whoever's left. I'm going with the New Day as at least part of the sole survivors on this team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they get the pin, even if like the Usos are still in there or whatever. I mean, when you look at the top to bottom of both sides, even though we don't, I guess, know the entire SmackDown representation, I think it's still, without a question, New Day is kind of off the charts a little bit with the Usos. They have a lot more longevity than the others at this point. And you got some guys in there with Bobby Roode and Chad Gable they're trying to push. Obviously the B team have taken a pretty big step back, but in the end, I definitely think this is another win for SmackDown. I don't know if they'll be counting that in the total.
We are. The okay. Scorecard. It's right here. It's written on the scorecard.
Well, there's another one for SmackDown
right in front of me.
There's another one for SmackDown.
So if you guys are keeping score right now, Chris has SmackDown at
2
and Raw at nothing, and I'm knotted up 1-1 SmackDown Raw. Next match is Cruiserweight Championship is on the line when Buddy Murphy defends against Mustafa Ali. Buddy Murphy has been just one hell of an impressive guy on 205 Live. I have loved his win. I think 205 Live in general is just getting increasingly more impressive. The talent there is just out of control. The matches are off the charts. I see Buddy Murphy retaining here. I think he's on one hell of a title reign right now, and he's on a great ride that I don't see ending anytime soon. So I'm going Buddy Murphy right here.
I agree, 100%.
Don't really know how you classify that one since it's not really it's a separate brand. So men's 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series elimination match. You've got Team SmackDown led by Shane McMahon with Rey Mysterio, Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe, and The Miz taking on Team Raw, Finn Balor, Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, and Braun Strowman. For me, given everything that we've seen with Shane McMahon and this heel turn that's taken place, I think there's a lot we can do here by having Raw win this match and SmackDown lose as a result of Shane McMahon's antics, and that can further along some of these potential feuds that Shane McMahon can have with the likes of the Rey Mysterios, the Daniel Bryans, even maybe a guy like The Miz. So I'm going to go with actually Team Raw winning this match on account of mistakes made or back being turned by Shane McMahon.
No, I definitely think that Raw wins, and I think I really chalk this up to them needing a way to go with Braun Strowman. Obviously, this week on Raw, he made some demands. And then of course Stephanie made her own demands, and if he wins, then he gets Baron Corbin, then he gets Brock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm definitely going for that reason alone. I think Braun has to come out and lead Raw to victory, so then he can follow up, and it makes sense at that point how he ends up getting his title match again with Brock
100%
Lesnar.
His title match against Brock Lesnar, and of course his singles match against Baron Corbin, which, again, to me, when we talked about last week the trajectory of Brock Lesnar as the Universal Champion, I think we were both in agreement that Brock Lesnar is probably not going to be competing at WrestleMania if he's going to be fighting in UFC around the same time. Yep. So I think that actually, to me, the timeline works really well. You have Braun Strowman versus Baron Corbin in that feud that you can have a match there at TLC. You can have a couple more matches maybe between the two of them before Royal Rumble, and maybe Royal Rumble is the pay-per-view at which Brock Lesnar finally drops the title to Braun Strowman, and Braun Strowman heads into WrestleMania 35 as the champion. So yeah. I agree with you. I see Braun Strowman leading them to victory. That means I have Raw right now. I have SmackDown right now at 2-1, and you as well have SmackDown at 2-1. Women's 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series elimination match. Team SmackDown, Carmella, Asuka, Naomi, Sonya Deville, and another name to be announced will be facing Team Raw. Mickie James, Natalya, Ruby Riott, Nia Jax, and Tamina Snuka, and of course Alexa Bliss will be the team captain there on the outside. This is interesting, in light of everything that happened with Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch. Who knows if that will play a part even in this Survivor Series elimination match. But from what we saw on Raw this week, and from what we saw with SmackDown coming in and invading Raw, we'll see potentially Raw could do something similar to SmackDown on SmackDown Live this week. But if they do, I think it kind of knots things up to where I believe Team SmackDown will win this match, probably when we find out who that final TBA name is. That'll be a big influence on the match. But I see SmackDown winning this one so that we have both of those men's and women's Survivor Series matches knotted up equally. Your thoughts here?
No, I agree with that. I think SmackDown wins this, but I mean, I'm curious to how they're going to protect Nia a little bit. You can tell she needs to be, if she's going to be heading into Ronda Rousey or heading to meet Ronda Rousey. And of course, her and Tamina they're really meant to be strong. So I kind of see some sort of shenanigans taking place there to get those guys, to get those ladies out of the match if that's what they're going to do. Maybe where, they're not necessarily taking complete pinfalls. Maybe they chase somebody out or, they get out of the match that way. I really don't know how they're going to protect them, but I definitely see SmackDown winning this one without a question. So yeah, definitely for SmackDown with me. So I'm what now?
So you are now 3-1 in favor of SmackDown, and I'm with my pick on SmackDown. There, I am also 3-1 in favor of SmackDown. Next match up here is Seth Rollins versus Shinsuke Nakamura. This is probably the match I'm most looking forward to. I don't know why WWE really has seemed to be dropping the ball lately with Shinsuke Nakamura. I don't know if this is going to be the great Matt Classic that we all hope it will be. It certainly could be. But it will be very interesting to see what happens here. Right now, as things stand, just in terms of who's going to end up winning this night. And again, Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch, because that's in jeopardy, that could throw a wrench into our predictions here. But I'm going Shinsuke Nakamura wins this match when Dean Ambrose interferes.
I am going to agree. I think that, as they made sure to point out by Corey Graves in that interview that Seth Rollins had with him on Monday, Seth can't focus. I mean, it just kind of gives him an easy out. And that wouldn't be enough in and of itself. The interference is obviously going to take it over the top and lean it in Shinsuke's direction. So I think Shinsuke Nakamura definitely wins this one. And great for him, man, because I really just feel like he's kind of sitting on idle, a little coasting going on, and not so much because of him, but just because they kind of pick and choose when they really want to do anything with him. But I love his gimmick. I love his character. I think he's a great heel. And I think it's also going to be a great match. It's definitely the one that I'm probably looking forward to the most as well, especially from a technical aspect. And so I'm looking forward to it, but Nakamura definitely wins this one, which I think puts us up both 4-1 now, 5-1. 4-1? 4-1.
5-1 for you. I got 4-2. But SmackDown in a commanding lead here.
What did you do with who else did you have? Where do we disagree?
Well, AOP, I had AOP winning that match.
That was the first one.
So, that gives me one for Raw, and I also have Raw winning that men's 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series match, which of course you agreed with me on that one. So those are the two Raw matches that I have, but honestly, this takes us into Rousey versus Becky Lynch. We really don't know what's going to be happening there, so I don't think we can say. But really,
we think it's going to be a no contest anyway.
Say what?
We both think it's going to be a no contest anyway.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a no contest anyway.
Even if Charlotte.
That leaves us Brock Lesnar versus AJ Styles. And, do you really have Brock Lesnar go over again? I got to see AJ Styles getting a win here. Again, I don't necessarily see it being a clean win, but I see AJ Styles I at least see AJ Styles getting the victory in some form, and that gives SmackDown the win for the night. But again, Brock Lesnar, when you look at last year and that headlining match, the storyline in WWE at the time was all about Brock Lesnar destroying everyone on that roster until he finally dropped the title to Roman Reigns. Then this year, I mean, this was well over a year, almost 2 years in the making, with no one being able to kick out of the F5. Lesnar even beat Braun Strowman, Now that that's over, and now that we know that Brock Lesnar is probably not going to be around much longer prior to him, heading into his next UFC fight, I've got to say that AJ Styles is picking up the win in this match.
Yeah, and I'm going to reevaluate. I didn't know how many matches we had, so I just kind of went down the list of which ones I saw could win. I think Ronda.
That's it.
I think Ronda.
I think we've got SmackDown winning regardless. You know what I mean?
I'm actually going to change my pick. I think if Ronda, the way that it turned out, because I'm not sure Ronda will be involved in any invasion this week necessarily, especially if she can't get physical with Becky. I think she would have come and attacked Becky or done something if that was still on. But since it's not, I don't think Ronda's going to be there. So I think Ronda takes the win now. I think it actually changes things a little bit, even if it's Charlotte. But I think she takes the win. It gives Raw another win at least, so it's not looking so lopsided. And then of course I'm with you on the other main event, and I think that AJ Styles absolutely wins that. And I say absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if Brock wins, but I just think that the way WWE has to look at this, it's one more match. It's kind of a meaningless match. And Braun's ultimately going over most likely anyway, and here probably sooner rather than later. So why not give AJ even more boost, even more momentum than what he's already had for this past year? Allow him the ability to go over Brock Lesnar. And keep in mind, Paul Heyman did get cut off in his promo when he was about to say that it's not a spoiler, it's a prediction. Or it's not a prediction, it's a spoiler. Yes. He got cut off, so he did not get to finish that, which does kind of set it up that Brock could take the fall here, which I think they calculated very well. So AJ wins. I think I'm going to change my pick that Ronda wins against whoever she's in a match. And there could be another match that I'm wrong on if I went back to reevaluate, just because I could get those, more like a 4-3 near toss up or whatever.
Yeah, bit more even up.
But either way, I'm okay with those picks. I think that's kind of how it's going to shake down, or at least close to. And so, I still have SmackDown ultimately winning, and I'm going to go ahead and give AJ the win too.
So, and hey, you know what? You could even though we kind of both sort of thought Raw was going to go over in that Survivor Series match, you never know. There could be some screwball thing happening there. Braun Strowman could certainly say, even if they lose, Braun Strowman could certainly say, I'm going to take what I want anyway.
That's true.
But I could see SmackDown winning because again, and I still feel like Raw is going to win that match because, it would just be great if Raw wins that match because of Shane McMahon, but SmackDown still wins the night. And then Shane McMahon comes out on Tuesday night and cuts a promo and says, I single-handedly won.
Right.
The night for SmackDown,
right?
So I could see that really playing into this new direction.
Well, I can also tell, you can also kind of tell a little tension between Stephanie McMahon and Baron Corbin now. She's expecting results, and I think that could kind of continue on. Baron Corbin can step down from this ambassador of sorts role, this authoritative role, and maybe get back into this normal competition and hopefully go far, because I think he's also good. And maybe they feel like they need him out there a little bit more, and they can maybe find somebody else to kind of play that role. Or maybe Stephanie could do it, and we shouldn't have so many damn authority figures in wrestling to begin with. But
I'll tell you what, next week on the show, we bring back Tag In, Tag Out. We'll get our thoughts on Dean Ambrose's heel turn so far. We'll give our thoughts on Baron Corbin. Are we tagging in or tagging out on him in that authority role right now, because he's been in it for quite a while? Kurt Angle, tag in, tag out on his return to the ring. And then, of course, we'll run down Survivor Series after the fact. We'll sort of tag in, tag out on the pay-per-view as a whole, and we'll see what happens after this the final Big Four pay-per-view of 2018, as we then start the big push into the Royal Rumble and then the road to WrestleMania, which it's hard to believe that we're
I know, it's really, you said really, we got a little time, but it is right around the corner. WrestleMania is always around the corner, though. And so, guys, that's been the Voice of Wrestling. Before we get out of here, though, we do have to kind of do this new little gimmick we're going to do, though, Nick, and you can wrap us up with your closing random thought of the week.
Closing random thought of the week is, guys, don't believe everything you read on the internet. The Washington Post reported last week that Braun Strowman had major backstage heat and was in big trouble with Vince McMahon and WWE. He based it on some comments that Mike Johnson made on PW Insider Elite Audio. Mike Johnson, immediately refuted that article. So for all of you out there who were believing that report about Braun Strowman being in trouble with Vince McMahon or possibly not winning the Universal title at Crown Jewel because of any backstage heat he has, it's completely ridiculous. That is my big rumor killer of the week. There was also a rumor that was circulating this week that Paige might be on her way to being cleared to return to the ring. Paige actually killed that rumor herself on Twitter, saying absolutely not. So she is not cleared. There is no major backstage trouble between Vince McMahon and Braun Strowman, and I really hate to break it to you, but there is no Santa Claus. So don't believe everything you read. Check with us, come to us, listen to us, the voice of wrestling.
You can believe everything.
We'll give it to you straight. We'll give you the truth. That's my final thought of the week.
Yeah, you can't believe everything you read, but you can believe everything, every single thing you hear right here on the Voice of Wrestling.
Well, yeah, and the reason why is because I don't read.
That's true. He doesn't. So he doesn't know how.
I don't read, so therefore I can't believe anything I read because I don't believe. So anything I say has to be 100% true.
That's true. He doesn't know how to read. It's just what's going on over there. Either way, we appreciate you tuning in to this full episode of The Voice of Wrestling. Really hope Becky gets well exceptionally fast because I'm already missing her. Already. And hopefully we'll keep you updated on that. But guys, enjoy Survivor Series one way or the other. We'll see what obviously happens. And of course, we'll discuss it right here on the show next week. That's Nick Paglino. I am Chris Cash. This has been The Voice of Wrestling. We'll see you next week.